What's going on, everyone? So there's this rumor going around about the upcoming Scream 7. Again, always take this stuff with a grain of salt. Nothing is official until it's official. So just keep that in mind. But there will be a new young lead again. But Sidney and Gail are once again the main characters along with Sidney's family. There's been a lot of rumors, a lot of speculation going around that, hey, this film is going to have Gail and Sidney as the primary leads, and that Sidney's family will be primary targets. Patrick Dempsey is supposed to be coming back. Makes sense after Thanksgiving. But this is something that kind of intrigues me a little bit because I think you have with it the simple explanation of how to get everybody kind of involved, right? So you could go about it one of two ways. You could do it the Gale way or the Sidney way, in which one kind of brings in the other. I think my guess is that it's probably Sidney, right? My guess is that Sidney and her family get attacked and Gail comes to help Sid. Because if this really is going to be about Sidney and her family, then you'd imagine that, like, hey, she's going to need some help. Maybe, Mark Kincaid, maybe he gets captured or something, right? Maybe that's the opening scene. And instead of having like an opening scene kill, or maybe like the nanny or somebody ends up dead, and now Mark and Sidney come home from like a night on the town or something, and it's just like a normal day, normal routine. She walks in, Ghostface is sitting there, maybe knocks out Mark, and she like is able to grab the kids and go, right? And she's like, oh, I need a safe haven, I need some help, right? Gail's like, hey, I can help you, let's do it. Like, that's probably, in a nutshell, my guess of how they get Sidney and Gale involved. You kind of have Sidney be the victim momentarily. Obviously, it's Sidney Prescott. She's going to ultimately take down Ghostface. But in the moment, you have her. She's been attacked. You don't have to go like Mark Kincaid in trouble type thing. You could just have it, her family be attacked. They escape, whatever. They take out one of the Ghostface, find out that there's going to be more coming, and just kind of alerts Gale. Maybe Gale knows, and then Gale flies to Sidney, or maybe Sidney and Mark and them fly to Gale, so that way they're all together to prepare for this onslaught or something, right? Or maybe Sidney's just like, hey, they found me. But you got to also imagine that, like, wouldn't Sidney have like fail safes in place? Right? Like, wouldn't she have like a secluded area that no one knows about but her? Right? Her and Mark are like the only two that would know of this place. Right? Like, don't you think like she'd be prepared because she's been attacked so many times and now she has children? Like, that's something that, like, because that's the whole point. Like, Sidney's always like prepared, right? She's always ready to take on Ghostface. She's always ready to bring the fight. But like, I don't know, like, or maybe that is the case, right? Maybe, Mark is a cameo. Maybe like she drops Mark and the kids off in this secluded, you know, isolated remote house or cabin or something, and then she goes and teams up with Gale, and Gale and Sidney go to take on Ghostface. And there's so many different directions in which they could go, which is why this Scream kind of feels exciting. My only thing is, like, I don't want it to be like a family member or relative or whatever. Like, I'm okay with Sidney and Gale being the main characters. I actually prefer it this go around because I've talked about it. Like, they haven't done a good job of having Sidney and Gale be basically background characters, right? Be like the cameo characters. They haven't done a great job of like writing them in. Like in Scream 5, Sidney, like, what was the point of having her in there other than just to say you had Sidney? I've talked heavily about the missed opportunities with her. Same thing with Gale in Scream 6. Like, what did Gale do that was so significant and important to her character? There was no real development of the characters other than like Scream 5, Gale loses Dewey. But even that whole storyline didn't make sense because, it should have been Gale that left, not Dewey, right? Because, I mean, Gale was the one that always left to chase grandeur things, 60 Minutes too, right? All that stuff. So that to me is a little off, a little weird, but nonetheless, I digress, right? Like, okay, fine. Tell me a good, convincing story with Sidney and Gale as like the main characters. You introduce some new groups, some new characters. That's cool, right? Because you need to continue, or more likely than not, they're going to want to continue the franchise. So you continue the franchise, you build some good characters, you tell a story around Sidney and Gale. Fine. Just don't make the motive be something like, it's the cousin's uncle's nephew of revenge. Like, no. Like, can we keep it within, like, you don't need, Ghostface doesn't need a reason to go after Sidney, right? Sidney's the white whale. Sidney's the one that every Ghostface wants to take out, right? Like, you can keep it simple, right? Obviously, we want a motivation for why, in general, they are targeting Sidney or targeting Gale, but like, like, yeah, I don't need some rehash of a previous film, but I am excited to see, hopefully, again, it comes down to the writing, but I am excited to see Gale and Sidney's development, growth, and progression as two characters, because it's always been really awkward with the two of them, right? Like, even in Scream 5, right? Like, they came together because of the death of Dewey, right? And, they kind of just were like, hey, but they hadn't seen or talked to each other in a long time, so they were kind of there. It was just like, hey, we're back in attack mode, right? So let's get it. I'd like a film, and I've talked about this before. I talked about this going into Scream 6, right? Like, I thought it would be cool. Well, this was before we knew Sidney was not going to be in the film, but one of the things that I talked about was like, and I feel like it was a missed opportunity. You could almost have like, that buddy cop type thing with Gale and Sidney and really develop their relationship in their core. They don't have Dewey anymore, right? Like, Gale doesn't have Dewey anymore. That's the one common denominator that both of them could always go to and always confide in, right? Like, Big Brother Dewey for Sidney, like, that was the one person in her life forever that she could count on, that she could trust, that she believed in, right? Like, even when they didn't talk for a long time, right? Like, she still immediately sees Dewey, answers the call, answers the phone. Like, that is her, like, world in a lot of ways, right? And same thing with Gale, right? Like, they had their divorce or whatever, but like, she still had love for her. He was always there when she needed it. He was always that person. That's why I don't like the idea. That's why I don't like that they made Dewey the one that left, because that's not Dewey's character. Dewey was always the guy that would go above and beyond to do whatever it took to be with Gale. Like, Gale was the one that was always leaving and running away and, chasing 60 Minutes too and all these things. So to me, it's like, it would have made more sense. And based on Scream 4, it's like they didn't actually watch the previous movies to understand where Gale and Dewey's character were in that timeline, right? Like, Gale was the one having struggles in Woodsboro, right? And like, I get Dewey, he loses his job as the sheriff, so it's like, okay, let's go try in New York, whatever, that was her out. But I don't know, I just feel like they should have went that another way. But to me, it's like, okay, you have an opportunity here to really build and continue to develop Gale, who I've said numerous times, I believe has the best character development out of all the characters, including Sidney. I think she just has, like, I mean, you go look at her arc between Scream 1 and Scream 5, essentially, right? Like, it's just so much depth and progression and just the change in her, right? But she's still kind of the same. Right? Still, you kind of still feel like she'll still like cut you at any point if need be, right? Like, it's those type of things. But I want to see the dynamic. But the other side of the thing would be to maybe have Gale be attacked, or maybe Sidney. Maybe that's how Sidney and the family. Because you got to remember, Gale nearly died in Scream 6, right? So what if like Sidney and Mark Kincaid and the family went to go visit Gale, right? And you might ask, oh, well, Ghostface is out there, right? Like, she's not going to bring her and her family to go bring Ghostface. But it's like, well, she would assume that they're all dead, right? Like, Gale would have gotten the information, would have known. But then if like you do it in New York, it's like, how long after is this? Like, so the Gale thing could be a little complicated, but if this picks up like, a year later or whatever, 2 years later, and, everything's been quiet on, the Eastern Front and all is good, right? Maybe Gale gets attacked and needs Sidney. And I'm not saying Sidney has to go to Gale, but maybe Gale has nowhere to go. Like, what if Gale is the opening scene? Like, she obviously doesn't die, right? So she ends up escaping, getting away, and she's like, I have nowhere to go, right? Like, I don't have Dewey, I don't have anybody. Like, who can I go to that can help me and keep me safe and make sure that I don't end up dead, right? And it's like, okay, I got to make the tough call. Sidney, like, hey, I need you. And she's like, yeah, sure, I'm going to help you. And then maybe that's how she gets sucked in. Maybe that's the whole thing. Like, maybe Ghostface uses Gale as the bait to find Sidney. And you have Gale get attacked, and boom, now Sidney goes and helps Gale. and then that leads to Ghostface tracking them both down. Right? I think that there's a lot of ways to go about it. We'll definitely explore more in depth individual ways, because I do think it's a lot of fun, and there are a lot of potentials with this. I just so ultimately default to like, please do right, do good by Gail and Sidney. Like, tell a good story, tell a good, develop them right, have the proper progression, have the proper just motive and backstory. Again, these two are the ones that have always survived. Don't you think Ghostface would want to take them out to be the first to do so, especially Sidney? Like, I don't think you need a ton. And Gail, you don't need any explanation, right? Like, Gail, her whole storyline has all been about, like, wherever Ghostface is, she is. Right? Even in Scream 5, that's how it was. No matter how many times she's almost died, no matter how many times Ghostface has nearly got her, like, she always shows up wherever Ghostface is, right? It's how she's built her brand and her career. So you don't even really need an explanation for why Gail's going to be there. And Sidney, again, you keep it simple. Ghostface is trying to take out everybody. Okay, well, you got what better way to start than with Sidney, right? Devise a plan to try to take out Sid. It's just, I don't think that it needs to be complicated, right? Simplicity sells. Keep it simple. Tell a good story. Build the characters. Build Sidney and Gail's characters. I haven't been a fan of how they've grown these two characters in the previous two films. Well, for Sidney, one film, right? And part of me feels like it's because they're not their characters. So I'm hoping that now that Kevin's back, right, he'll be able to kind of right the ship with these two, because he's the one that, created it, right? So he's the one that understands it, and, maybe give these two some creative opinions and voice on how the character should grow. Because, again, I don't think that they did a good job in Scream 5 and 6. I thought they did a good job with Dewey overall. I just didn't like the reason. I didn't like that he left. Right? I think you could have done the exact same thing, and Gail left. Right? And he's heartbroken and devastated and hit rock bottom because Gail left him. Right? Like, that, to me, is something. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. Pass a question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Now, are you excited for these two? Do you agree with my points? Disagree with my points? Again, however you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me out a lot. Helps me enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.